A storm descends on northern France, not thunder, but history itself. Rain pounds the fields, turning grass into sucking mud, choking horses and men alike. August 26th, 1346. This day will not be forgotten. On a low rise outside the village of Crécy-en-Ponthieu, King Edward III of England makes a decision that will change medieval warfare forever. Outnumbered, pressed by a pursuing army, deep in enemy territory, he does not retreat. Instead, he prepares to stand and fight. Wagons are hauled into position, trees fused into a defensive barrier. Stakes and ditches are dug. Behind this crude fortification stand dismounted English men-at-arms in the center, flanked by English and Welsh longbowmen. Not all knights, not all nobles, but seasoned veterans and yeomen whose bows will make myth of them. At his side stands the Black Prince, just 16, soon to be baptized in fire and steel. Then the French arrive. Banners snap in the storm. Trumpets blast through the mist. King Philip VI of France brings what might be the greatest mounted force in Europe. Tens of thousands strong, perhaps 3 times Edward's numbers, including thousands of heavily armored knights and mounted men-at-arms. Convinced of victory, proud and impatient, they surge forward. Their initial assault is led not by knights, but by Genoese crossbowmen, elite mercenaries. They advance into the rain, firing their bolts. But their weapons are slow, their shields and extra gear left far behind, and the longer-ranged English longbowmen overwhelm them within minutes. The Genoese break and flee, only to be cut down as they run. Chaos erupts. French nobles, scornful of infantry and archers, charge headlong, not as a unified line, but in waves of desperate assault. They push through fleeing crossbowmen. Horses slip and sink in the mud. Formations crumble. And then the English longbows speak. From both flanks, bowstrings hum. Thousands of arrows arc high, falling like iron rain. Skilled archers can loose a dozen shots a minute. Hundreds of thousands of shafts will fly that day, some from distances beyond the reach of cavalry or crossbow. Arrows pierce mail, punch through helmets, and unseat knights. They lash at horses, sending panicked mounts crashing into their own ranks. The battlefield becomes a death trap of shattered steel and broken bodies. Time and again, the French cavalry charges 15, 16 times, but each assault is shattered long before it reaches the English line. Horses sink in mud. Men falter under relentless arrow storms. Discipline collapses. By nightfall, the flower of French nobility lies slaughtered on the slope. Counts, dukes, even Philip's own brother among them. The mounted knight, once the undisputed master of the battlefield, has been humiliated by common archers. This was the Battle of Crécy. Not simply a clash of arms, but a detonation in the history of warfare, where discipline shattered pride, where the longbow humbled the lance, where infantry rose to supremacy and the myth of chivalric cavalry died in the rain. Stay with us. In the next segment, we're breaking down the defensive formations and terrain choices that anchored Edward's line, the terrifying arrow storms that rewrote the rules of combat, the deadly command failures that turned French glory into slaughter. Hold fast, because at Crecy, the storm didn't just roll in, it reshaped the world. Part 1. Setup. The 100 Years' War erupts and armies converge. Flashback to 1337. A dynastic dispute ignites a war that will ravage a continent. Edward III of England, grandson of a French king through his mother, asserts a claim to the French crown, challenging Philip VI and triggering a conflict that will scar Western Europe for over a century, the 100 Years' War. What begins as legal posturing rapidly descends into relentless violence, raids and chevauchés, mounted burning campaigns, designed to cripple wealth as much as military strength, devastate the fertile lands of northern France. Armies burn towns, seize livestock, and force local populations to flee or starve. By 1346, 9 years into this grinding struggle, Edward makes a bold and ruthless strategic gamble. In mid-July, he lands on the Normandy coast with a force of roughly 14,000 men. From this foothold, he launches a lightning campaign, marching due north. Towns fall, countryside burns. French prestige bleeds away as his army advances. His force is lean by medieval standards, but lethal. About 4,000 men-at-arms, professional soldiers and dismounted knights trained to fight on foot as hardened infantry. Roughly 10,000 longbowmen, yeomen whose entire lives have been conditioned by the powerful English longbow. Across the field of engagement, Philip responds with overwhelming force. France rallies the largest army seen in generations, possibly 30,000 to 40,000 men in total. At its core, around 12,000 mounted knights and men-at-arms, the pride of French chivalry and heavy cavalry. Approximately 6,000 Genoese crossbowmen, elite mercenaries famed throughout the Mediterranean for their skill with the crossbow. But numbers alone do not win battles. Aware of the numerical disadvantage, Edward does not seek a spontaneous pitched battle. Instead, he manipulates the maneuver war. Deliberately retreating northward, he draws the larger French army into a pursuit that will stretch supply lines and strain discipline. Then, near the village of Crécy-en-Ponthieu, he halts. He chooses his battlefield with cold precision. On a sloping ridge crowned by a windmill, with woods anchoring its flanks and firm ground beneath his feet, Edward positions his force. The incline forces any attacker to advance uphill, slow, exposed, and deadlier still under fire. A steady rain begins to fall. One of those slow, relentless drizzles that turns clay soil into a choking morass. Mud clings to boots, wheels, and hooves, sapping strength and morale alike. The French arrive late in the day, tired from a long pursuit. Horses are blown. Men are hungry. Commanders quarrel. Discipline, always fragile in medieval armies, frays. Yet, despite exhaustion, pride intervenes. French nobles, eager for glory and confident in the superiority of mounted chivalry, demand immediate action, believing that sheer valor will crush the English before nightfall. Edward does not intend to meet them in the open. As the rain intensifies, his soldiers drag wagons forward, chaining them into crude but effective barricades. Stakes are driven into the ground. Trenches and small pits disrupt the ground. Archers fan out across the slope. Men-at-arms dismount, shields locked, ready. Every movement is deliberate, defensive, calculated. To the French eye, these preparations might appear like hesitation. They mistake preparation for fear. They see calm in the mud, and they order the advance. With that, decision, born of arrogance, exhaustion, and reign, the fate of chivalric warfare begins to tilt. The barricades are set, the bows are strung, and the killing ground is ready. Part 2. Wagon fortifications, the wooden wall that held firm. What follows at Crécy is not improvisation. It is preparation made visible. Edward III understands a truth most medieval commanders ignore. Victory does not belong to the boldest charge, but to the army that controls space and shapes the battlefield itself. So long before the French line appears, the English reshape the ground between them and disaster. At the rear of his position, the army's most vulnerable assets, the supply wagons, are dragged forward. Normally, these would trail far behind the battle line, easy prey for raiders or panic-stricken cavalry. Today, they are locked together into a lager, a defensive ring of timber, iron fittings, and leather. This wagon barricade guards the rear and the flanks, preventing French cavalry from sweeping around the English line. Behind it sits the army's lifeblood, food, spare bows, and hundreds of thousands of arrows, primed for the killing ahead. But wagons alone are not enough. In front of the English position, the ground is prepared with deliberate and deadly care. Tens of thousands of small holes and pits are dug, about a foot across and a foot deep, then concealed with sod and straw. These seemingly innocuous divots will maim horses and disrupt cavalry momentum. Pits are only part of the plan. Caltrops, jagged iron spikes, are scattered across the slope to shatter hooves and break the rhythm of any mounted assault. At the center of this engineered killing ground, the men-at-arms, knights and professional soldiers, have dismounted. Their heavy war horses are held back behind the lager. Here on foot, they form a dense core of shields and discipline. On the flanks, the longbowmen deploy in sweeping formations that do more than simply fire. Forward. They enfilade anything advancing toward the center, turning the slope itself into a funnel of death. The rain, relentless and cold, becomes an unlikely ally. The Genoese crossbowmen in the French army, famed mercenaries whose bolts could pierce armor at moderate range, watch helplessly as their strings slacken. Wet cords reduce crossbow rate of fire drastically, and their heavy pavises, protective shields, bog down in the mud, delaying even deployment. When at last they advance, the Genoese are underprepared and unsupported. What should have been an organized opening assault quickly collapses into disarray. Furious French knights, impatient for glory, ride them down to clear the path. But in doing so, they break their own cohesion. Men and horses are funneled into narrow approaches compressed by both terrain and barricades. Each gasp for momentum is met with another obstacle, another risk. The English line remains steady, unmoving. Behind the wagons, arrows are passed forward hand to hand with practiced routine. Archers step into position, release, then step back, never losing rhythm, never abandoning their spaced firing lanes. The slope becomes an executioner's stage. Horses scream, knights are pierced from range, and French charges lose shape long before they reach the shield wall. The wagon fortifications do not merely defend, they shape the battle. They force the French into fatal lanes of death where courage counts for nothing and mass becomes a liability. No amount of chivalric zeal can overcome obstacles, mud, entrenched men, and coordinated archery fire. This is not the romance of mounted knights charging in open fields. This is logistics, terrain, and discipline turned into a weapon. The wall holds. The enemy stacks up before it, and above the din of hooves and shouted orders, a new sound comes to dominate the field: the rising whistle of arrows. Part 3. Arrow Barrages. The longbow's shredding storm what descends on. The French at Crécy is not a volley. It is a system of destruction. The English longbow is not merely a weapon, it is an institution. Nearly 6 feet of seasoned yew. Drawing well over 100 pounds, it demands a lifetime of conditioning. English law has required practice since childhood. These men have bent bows since their bones were still forming. Their arrows are heavy, brutal, iron-tipped. Bodkins, narrow and hardened, designed to punch through mail and exploit gaps in plate. Broadheads, wide-bladed and vicious, meant to cripple horses and turn cavalry charges into chaos. In trained hands, a skilled archer can loose 10 to 12 arrows a minute and keep doing it. No crossbow in Europe can match that sustained rate of fire. And at Crecy, there are thousands of them. Edward III does not order mass volleys. There is no single command, no dramatic release. The archers fire by rhythm. Each man shoots independently. Step forward, draw, release, step back. Again and again. And again, the result is not a wave. It is a continuous storm. Arrows arc high into the gray sky, then plunge almost vertically onto the advancing French. Shields are bypassed. Helmets offer little protection from plunging shots. Faces, necks, armpits, and horses' flanks are exposed. At long range, accuracy matters less than volume. Within minutes, the slope begins to die. The Genoese crossbowmen advance first, as doctrine demands. But they are doomed before they fire their opening shots. Rain has soaked their bowstrings, robbing them of power. Reloading is slow. Their massive pavises, the shields meant to protect them, lag behind, mired in mud. Against them, English archers unleash 3 arrows for every bolt loosed in reply. Crossbow bolts fall short. Longbow arrows do not. Men drop in rows. Formations dissolve. Panic spreads. The Genoese break and flee, only to be ridden down by the French knights behind them, enraged by delay and desperate to reach the enemy. Battle collapses into chaos before the main assault even begins. Then the knights charge. Wave after wave surges uphill, 15, perhaps 16 separate assaults. But the ground is slick with rain and blood. Horses stumble, hooves slide. Fallen mounts become barricades of flesh and steel, forcing following riders to slow, swerve, or halt entirely. Every hesitation is fatal. Arrows punch through visors, slip beneath arm plates, drive into groins and eye slits. Horses scream as shafts bury deep in muscle and lung, throwing armored riders violently into the mud. Men fall and cannot rise. Armor that once symbolized dominance now becomes a coffin. Knights are trampled, pinned, suffocated beneath their own weight. Bodies stack 2 and 3 deep in places, clogging the slope and turning the charge into a slow-motion disaster. Among the dead rides John of Bohemia, blind but bound by honor. Tied to his retainers, he advances straight into the storm and is cut down. An act of personal courage rendered meaningless by tactical reality. By dusk, the field is unrecognizable. Estimates vary, but the pattern is undeniable. Thousands of French lie dead, including an astonishing proportion of the nobility: dukes, counts, bannerets, and princes. The English lose only a few hundred at most. This is not merely defeat, it is social catastrophe. Crecy proves, beyond argument, that armored cavalry, the supreme force of medieval warfare, can be annihilated by disciplined infantry and sustained missile fire. Valor does not fail here. Assumption does. As the arrow storm finally slackens and darkness settles over the field, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. The age of unquestioned chivalry has been pierced, not by chance, not by treachery, but by preparation, discipline, and arrows loosed without mercy. Part 4. The battle's fury and French humiliation. By mid-afternoon, the rain begins to ease, but the killing does not. The field below Edward's Ridge is already choked with bodies, shattered horses, and broken formations. Mud clings to armor. Blood darkens the slope. And still the French command presses forward. The Genoese crossbowmen are ordered to advance again. It is an attempt to restore order, to reclaim honor, to restart a battle that has already slipped beyond control. They move out across the churned ground, exhausted, soaked, and exposed. And once more, the English longbows answer. The effect is immediate and devastating. Arrows tear through the advancing ranks. Men drop in clusters. Within moments, over 1,000 Genoese are dead or dying, struck down by shafts or crushed beneath the hooves of French knights charging through their retreat. Panic spreads faster than steel. Any semblance of coordination vanishes. Then come the knights. This is the heart of the French army, the embodiment of chivalry, the social elite raised from birth to believe that mounted shock combat decides wars. They charge anyway, wave after. Wave surges uphill, 15 separate assaults, perhaps more, but none arrive intact. Each charge is more fragmented than the last. Horses flounder in the mud. Riders are struck before speed can build. Fallen mounts form walls of flesh and iron, forcing those behind to slow, detour, or stop completely. Momentum dies before contact. Arrows rake the slope. Spears and poleaxes finish what missiles begin. Men-at-arms step forward only when needed, striking isolated survivors who reach the line. The battlefield becomes a grinder. Armor that once symbolized dominance now ensures death. Knights fall and cannot rise. They suffocate in mud. They are trampled by their own. They are pinned beneath dead horses, helpless as arrows find the gaps in their plate. Even King Philip VI is not spared. He is wounded amid the chaos, struck, unhorsed, and forced from the field as night approaches. The French king abandons the battle, leaving command to dissolve entirely. Around him, the symbols of French prestige vanish into the mud. Banners that represent centuries of lineage are trampled flat. Heraldry becomes meaningless in the crush. By nightfall, between 1,500 and 4,000 French knights lie dead, including princes, counts, and some of the highest nobility in Europe. An entire ruling class has been shattered in a single afternoon. And the English? Their losses are astonishingly light, perhaps 300 men. Crécy is no ordinary victory. It is a revelation. Here, discipline defeats numbers, preparation destroys bravado, and tactical foresight renders traditional valor obsolete. The battlefield becomes a lesson written in blood. Cavalry alone can no longer dominate war. Infantry, positioning, and sustained missile fire have seized control of the future. This is not merely defeat for France. It is humiliation. The French nobility bleeds not only physically, but symbolically. The myth of chivalric invincibility. The belief that courage and noble birth guarantee victory is punctured forever. By nightfall, the meaning of the day is unmistakable. Europe has witnessed the death of old warfare and the birth of a disciplined, modern battlefield. The revolution of Crécy will echo for generations, reshaping tactics, strategy, and the very definition of courage in war. And nothing will ever be the same again. Part 5. Legacy. Chivalry's eclipse and warfare's dawn. Crécy is not just a battle. It is a watershed, a violent hinge in history where one age collapses and another forces its way forward. On that rain-soaked slope, the longbow, a weapon wielded by common men, proves an unforgiving truth. Discipline, training, and coordination can annihilate the finest knights in Europe. Noble birth offers no immunity. Armor offers no certainty. Courage alone is not enough. The age of mounted chivalry dominating the battlefield does not end in theory or debate. It ends in blood and mud. For centuries, the knight had been war incarnate. The social elite, the battlefield elite, the embodiment of honor and power. At Crécy, that myth is exposed as fragile. Headlong charges, once celebrated as the height of valor, are revealed to be vulnerable, even suicidal, against prepared infantry and sustained missile fire. France reels from the shock. The loss is not merely military, but structural. Thousands of nobles lie dead, men who formed the backbone of feudal authority. In the aftermath, French kings begin to understand a new reality. Wars cannot be won by prestige and lineage alone. Armies must be organized, disciplined, and centrally controlled. The lesson will be repeated, brutally, at Poitiers in 1356, and again at Agincourt in 1415. Each time, the message grows louder. Strategy defeats status. Preparation crushes pride. England, meanwhile, emerges transformed. The longbowman, once a peasant bound by obligation, becomes a national symbol, proof that skill can outweigh birth, that innovation can humble tradition, that common soldiers, trained and trusted, can decide the fate of kingdoms. A new English identity begins to take shape, one tied not to glittering cavalry, but to discipline, adaptability, and battlefield intelligence. And beyond bows and arrows, Crecy signals something even larger. Gunpowder weapons are already appearing on Europe's fringes. Cannons will soon speak louder than bows. But the principle revealed at Crecy will endure long after the longbow fades. Wars are won by preparation, positioning, and coordinated firepower. Cavalry does not disappear, but it is no longer king. Today, the fields of Crecy are quiet. Grass grows where men once fell screaming. The rain still comes. The slope still rises. Monuments stand in silence, but history remembers. Every general, every strategist, every historian who studies war encounters the same lesson written there in blood. Boldness without preparation invites ruin. Discipline and foresight can humble even the mightiest power. Crecy is not just a memory. It is a warning and a revelation. The arrows that shredded armor also shredded an era, and from that muddy hillside, the future of warfare was born. Conclusion. When the storm finally clears, when the rain finally stopped falling at Crecy, the world did not return to what it was. On that hillside, an army learned that courage without control is useless. That tradition, when unexamined, becomes a liability. And that war does not reward the proud. It rewards the prepared. Knights rode into battle believing history itself rode with them. Instead, they met men who understood terrain, timing, and discipline, and who turned preparation into a weapon deadlier than any blade. Crecy was not chaos. It was clarity. A moment when the old rules shattered in full view of Europe. When the common soldier rose. When the future arrived early, carried not by horses, but by arrows. Every battle that followed, Poitiers, Agincourt, and beyond, echoed the same lesson first spoken here in rain and blood. And that is why Crecy still matters. Because the forces that decide outcomes have not changed. Pride still blinds. Assumptions still kill. And preparation still decides who walks away when the storm finally breaks. If history teaches us anything, it is this. The world does not change quietly. It changes at moments like Crecy. And when it does, only those who adapt survive.